Howdy everybody, Mr. Bob from the North Carolina Zoo, your neighborhood naturalist. And it's a little overcast today, but I have on the high visibility shirt. Bear with me today, I have a lot of yellow going on. One of the things I've mentioned that naturalists are particularly good at is what we call environmental stewardship. And we're going to do a little of that, and I'll explain why it's important in just a moment or two. Long ago, long before I was ever known as the neighborhood naturalist, Mr. Bob had another nickname that was given to me by a young man, 5th grade student at Guy B. Teachy Elementary School many years ago. I got to be known as the litter dude. And my particular brand of environmental stewardship often involves going out and picking up litter and trash. Lately, there has been a lot of information in the news that talks about 3 initials, PPE. PPE stands for Personal Protective Equipment, and I'm actually using quite a bit today. That's why I have my yellow theme. You'll notice I happen to be also wearing my scarf today. Because of the COVID-19 issue and because I'm going to be leaving my yard, I'm actually going to be wearing a mask. This is not high-tech stuff. This is nothing more than a yellow bandana. Chose this one particularly just so it would complement the rest of the ensemble. I'll also be wearing a hat today. And this is a nice reflective hat. It's a high visibility yellow. That's kind of important, again, for 2 reasons. Number 1, so I can be seen. I want to be as vibrant and bright as possible. And number 2, even though it's a little cloudy and overcast, sometimes I get a little sun where I don't need it to be. So I'll actually be wearing a hat today. We'll go ahead and put this one on. Kind of floppy, but it works. When we go out and we get ready to do a little litter pickup, one of the things I always need is gloves. Sometimes I wear heavier gloves if I'm doing a really big pickup. Sometimes I just need these to be a barricade. And that's what these are. These are simply nitrile gloves. They're basically exam gloves, and they're designed to provide a barricade between me and anything out there. So I'll have my gloves, I'll have on my hat, my reflective high visibility shirt. I have a set of grabbers. I use these for 2 reasons. Number 1, so it puts another little bit of distance between me and anything I might happen to pick up. Plus, it means I don't have to bend over quite so much. So, I've got grabbers, color, mask, more color, barricade, something to collect stuff with. So, let me get suited up and let's go out and see what kind of trash we find on the side of the road right here in my neighborhood. You ready to go? Okay. Alrighty then. Well, that didn't take too terribly long, and we actually did find some stuff while we were out there. One of the things I mentioned again, I hate throwing things away that still have a usable life. A week or so ago, I showed you how to turn an old sandbox into a pollinator garden. We'll do an update on that shortly. My bucket here was a kitty litter tub, and I just fished it out of the trash because I didn't want to throw it away. So, let's get into the kind of stuff we found out here on the road. And I'll tell you why it's not such a good thing to let it sit out in the environment. This one is kind of interesting. It's an old beverage container, and I say old, underline that old. This is an old can, and it's actually made out of steel. So the can itself is slowly starting to decompose. It's rusting. The top is aluminum and the bottom is steel. So this has a lot of different metals in it. All of these can be recycled. Aluminum cans in particular are great to recycle because it uses less energy to make a new can out of an old can than it does to dig the ore out of the ground and start from scratch. Cans. That one was steel. This one, well, it was aluminum. The place where I was picking up litter down at the end of the street just got mowed. It's just recently mowed, and somebody ran over this with a big lawnmower. This is another beverage can. It's now bunches of little small pieces of aluminum. Still recyclable, but now that it gets cut up like this, it can become a human health hazard. Not only because of the germs that might be on it. This is a heavily sugared beverage, and bacteria love that sugar if there's any left in the can. The other thing that happens is people go walking through the grass all the time in flip-flops, barefoot, and it's real easy to cut your foot on this. If it happens to have some bacteria or a virus, as we're having to deal with right now, not a good thing at all. What used to be a cigarette lighter, also laying on the side of the road. This is made out of plastic. Now, plastic is particularly bad. I've said this before on numerous occasions, and I'll say it again and again and again. Plastic does not break down. Plastic breaks apart into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. I don't know if you happened to catch Steve and Wendy about a week or so ago on Earth Day on the 22nd of April, as they were coming to you live from the zoo. They were talking a lot about microplastics, tiny little bits and pieces of plastic that get broken down. It floats in the water, it stays in the water, we can eat it, we can drink it, so can animals. In a lot of cases, we do not know what the really bad side of this is. Old cigarette lighters. This is one that I particularly have a gripe with. Straws. We talk quite often in my world of naturalists about single-use plastics, and straws are typically used one time for the duration of the beverage you're drinking, and then it's tossed aside. These things can float, they can, animals can ingest them, and they can get hung up in their throats, in their digestive tract, in their stomach. Not a good thing. And again, they just sit out there and slowly break apart. There's a lot better ways to deal with this. You can actually get a stainless steel one that's reusable and cleanable. There are bamboo ones which you can get, which are biodegradable after you use them for a month or so. You can use paper. That happens quite a lot. The last thing that I happened to pick up, and I'll mention this one. I'm going to set my bucket down. Again, if you happen to catch Steve and Wendy when they were talking about this on Earth Day, Steve actually had a great big 5-gallon jug full of cigarette filters. We at the zoo participate in an event known as the International Coastal Cleanup. It's sponsored by the Ocean Conservancy out of Washington, D.C. It takes place in the months of August, September, and October. Hands down, the number one thing we always find are cigarette filters. Filters are particularly bad. There are a lot of reasons. Number one, it's been in someone's mouth. That's why I left my gloves on. But number two, people often think that the fiber in here is paper. It's not. This is, gosh, I don't know if I can tear this one apart. This is actually a plastic fiber. It's called cellulose acetate, and it does its job. It's a absorbent plastic, and it soaks up a lot of the poisons in the cigarette, and they are poison. I'll hold this up. I don't know if you can see this. I'll get a little closer so you can. You'll notice that it's brown. The cellulose acetate fiber in a cigarette filter does its job. It traps toxins. What kind of toxins? Nicotine. Nicotine is one of the chemicals that's found in tobacco. It's a poison. If we took this stuff and injected it into our directly into our bloodstream, it would do grievous damage to each of us. Not a good thing. Formaldehyde. That's what they put in you when you die. It's a preservative. You also get arsenic, again, another organic poison. Plus, there are heavy metals such as lead and cadmium. Cadmium in and of itself is it's not a carcinogen, but it does act, it is a carcinogen. Lead, it can cause damage to the central nervous system. It can actually mess up your ability to do things. So these are things that are out there. Since it is a plastic, and just to give you an idea, there are probably about 12,000 tiny little fibers in this one filter. So as this thing slowly breaks apart, all of those fibers float in the water. Sometimes they hold on to the poison. Sometimes they let the poison go. Sometimes the poison gets in the water. Frogs and amphibians have the ability to absorb a lot of those things through their skin, and they can absorb these poisons. So when you get too many of these in the water, it can do really bad things for the animals that live here normally. We call them native species. That's not a good thing. Also, as this plastic fiber breaks down, it becomes suspended in the water. Ultimately, you and I will probably ingest it. We'll either drink it in our water because it's usually not filtered out at the water treatment plant, or we'll eat it in food. A lot of processed food does have some plastics in it. So those are a couple of the reasons we like to pick up litter. It's stewardship for the environment. It helps the environment stay safer and actually more healthy for native animals and for us. And it also kind of eliminates an eyesore. Aluminum cans, they're not really poison. They're not going to cause a lot of problems. If they sit there, they are an eyesore. That means when you see them and you're outside, it immediately draws your attention because they're usually brightly colored. And when that happens, suddenly you're not enjoying nature as much. You're paying a lot more attention to the aluminum can that's out in the environment. So that's just one of the things you as a neighborhood naturalist can do to actually take stewardship and take care of the natural environment. I do it, I invite you to do it, but I also invite you to be safe. Cover your hands, cover your face, and be seen. Wear your personal protective equipment. Thanks, guys. For the North Carolina Zoo, I'm Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. Stay safe, okay? I'll see you next time.